Welcome back. Thank you for rejoining me in this what is looking like it's going to be a long investigation. We are now actually we have a bit more to go with the introduction to a work that now I see is um, attributed to le Comte de St. Germain. That means to me, when I see this word, uh, and I've seen it now a couple of times, that this first I understood that this was the only known work by Saint Germain. Now I see, today I was looking around and it said the work is attributed to him. So that seems to be a slightly lower level of certainty about the authorship. Certainly, we know that Cagliostro was in a dungeon. We don't know about Saint Germain. It could be that while his official death is 1784, if he lived beyond that, excuse me, that he could have been imprisoned at some time later than that, perhaps late into the French Revolution, as some people said they had seen him during that period and that he was imprisoned. I'm not quite sure where or when. We can't be sure of these things. But as this work, La Sainte Trinosophie, the most holy Trinosophia, this work, that it's attributed to him, the opening scene starts in something like a dungeon where he's being imprisoned. But that could be metaphorical, could be a metaphorical dungeon. So it says here, like, that, an alchemist and man of the world, man of the world. That to me suggests a man of action, a man who understood the workings of the world and had kind of mastered the art of living in the world and having a great influence, and being a man of means, that is, he had considerable wealth and considerable knowledge, who passed through the drawing rooms of all Europe and ended, well, we don't know, ended this way, but according to this here, ended by falling into the dungeons of the Inquisition at Rome, if the manuscript is to be believed. That is, if we are to take it literally. He might have run afoul of some powers greater than himself. He alludes to forces greater than himself, as we've seen in maybe was it the last video or something. He alludes to, no, the video before last, he alludes to forces greater than himself. And we may surmise that if he had a very powerful influence on the French Revolution, that when it turned into a very negative direction, that perhaps he ran afoul of these forces greater than himself. And this may be the answer to the question of whether this sort of dungeon atmosphere that is conjured, that is described in the opening section of this work that is attributed to him, if it's literal or metaphorical, we're not quite sure. So, the title of the manuscript, La Sainte Trinosophie, translated into English, means the most holy Trinosophia, or the most holy threefold wisdom. The title itself opens a considerable field of speculation. Is there a connection between la très sainte Trinosophy and the Masonic Brotherhood of les Trinosophistes, which was founded in 1805 by the distinguished Belgian Freemason and mystic Jean-Marie Ragon, already referred to? The knowledge of occultism possessed by Ragon is mentioned in terms of the highest respect for, again, H.P. Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, who says of him that, quote, for 50 years he studied the ancient mysteries wherever he could find accounts of them, unquote. Is it not possible that Ragon, as a young man, either knew Saint-Germain or contacted his secret society? Ragon was termed by his contemporaries, quote, the most learned Mason of the 19th century. Well, we just simply don't know. And, preserving my extremely skeptical view of all these things, I tend to regard these allusions to secret societies and sacred knowledge and all of this as just a kind of mind control that is maybe funded, encouraged, promulgated by forces higher up as a form of mind control. That's my view of it. So I'm hardly in the thrall, you might say. I'm hardly swept up in all of this. And Madame Blavatsky in particular, I think she was kind of, in my view, kind of a low-level political agent, a puppet. But anyway, let's go on, because my mind is not made up. In 1818, before the lodge of Les Trinosophistes, he delivered a course of lectures on ancient and modern initiation in which he repeated at the request of that lodge in 1841. These lectures were published under the title Cours philosophiques et interprétatifs des initiations anciennes et modernes. In 1853, Ragon published his most important work, Orthodoxie Masonique. I guess the Orthodox Masonic, the maybe you could call it the Masonic Bible. Maybe you could translate it that way. Ragon died in Paris about 1866, and two years later, his unfinished manuscripts were purchased from his heirs, by the Grand Orient of France for 1,000 francs. A high mason told Madame Blavatsky that Ragon had corresponded for years with two Orientalists in Syria and Egypt, one of whom was a Copt gentleman, a Coptic. How fascinating. These strands of a web of occult complexity, intrigue. It invites one to spend years of their life trying to puzzle it out and unravel it. And in the end, what do you get from it? That's what I'm skeptical about. Is there anything in this at all, or is it just a big rabbit hole? Ragon defined the lodge of the Trinosophistes as those who study three sciences. Madame Blavatsky writes, it is on the occult properties of the three equal lines or sides of the triangle that Ragon based his studies and founded the famous Masonic Society of the Trinosophists, or Trinosophists. Ragon describes the symbolism of the triangle in substance as follows. The first side, or line, represents the mineral kingdom, which is the proper study for apprentices. The second line represents the vegetable kingdom, which the companions should learn to understand, because in this kingdom, the generation of bodies begins. The third line represents the animal kingdom, from the exploration of which the master mason must complete his education. It has been said of the Lodge of Trinosophists that, quote, it was at one time the most intelligent society of Freemasons ever known. It adhered to the ancient landmarks, but gave clearer and more satisfactory interpretations to the symbols of Freemasonry than are afforded in the symbolical lodges. I don't know what symbolical lodges. I know lodges are places of meeting. They're like chapters or wards in a church. It practiced 5 degrees. So there are 5 degrees of this form of trinosophy, I guess. In the third, candidates for initiation received a philosophic and astronomical explanation of the Hiramic legend, which I don't know what that is. But it's all very sort of, well, the allure of all of these mysteries and strange sort of allusions to ancient figures and all of this is sort of exerts, I think, a kind of hypnotic effect on the imagination, and that's where I think the danger is. But the mission of this is to try to understand actually, physically, factually, who was Saint-Germain? What did he actually do? What were the sources of his wealth, of his physical, the his apparently inexhaustible youthfulness, his talents. We want to know factually. I'm not really interested in getting caught up in understanding all of this esoterica, but we must make our way through it, because along the way we may pick up clues that can be corroborated by others, and we can begin to build up an actual sense of the man. And I would find that to be exciting and inspiring in terms of developing my own abilities and expanding my own sense of what is possible in terms of being a human being in this realm of existence. That's all that's interesting to me, not kind of delving into a sea of esoterica and ancient symbols and all the rest of it. But we'll do our duty and we'll get through this. The Egyptianized interpretation of Freemasonic symbolism, which is so evident in the writings of Ragon and other French Masonic scholars of the same period, such as Croix du Gabelin and Alexandre Lenoir, and also present in figures and text of the Saint-Germain manuscript. In his comments on the rite of Mizraim, called the Egyptian rite, Ragon distinguishes 90 degrees of Masonic mysteries. I've heard that elsewhere, that they're not 33, they're in fact 90. The first to 33rd degrees he terms symbolic. The 34th to 66th degrees, philosophic. The 67th to 77th, mystic. And the 78th to 90th, Kabbalistic. The Egyptian Freemasonry of Cagliostro may also have been derived from Saint-Germain or from some common body of illuminists of whom Saint Germain was the moving spirit. I suppose that means the most important exponent, the driving force, the most preeminent driving force in this. I think that my own sense is that his own consciousness, his sense of himself as a man of action, wishing to guide things in a favorable direction for the human race, that he certainly perhaps had his foot in, certainly one foot in secret societies and this kind of, what would you call it, subculture, secret societies, but that his other foot, I think it was in a sort of calculated way. He needed these secret societies to carry out a mission, a greater mission. That's just my view of him now. That he was primarily a man of action. So we'll go forward from that. That's what my instinct tells me. Cagliostro's memoir, that is, he used these secret societies to achieve an end. He was not so immersed and so caught up in this deep sort of miasma of esoterica that he lost his way, or lost the sense of himself as someone, as an agent of change for the benefit of humanity. Now, I could be way off in this, and some people might be upset with me about this. They may feel that all of this esoteric is incredibly important. I'm not married to any of my present viewpoints on this. But moving on. Cagliostro's memoirs contain a direct statement of his initiation into the order of Knights Templar at the hands of Saint-Germain. And we can get into the Knights Templar another time. Deluchet gives us what a modern writer on Cagliostro calls a fantastic account of the visit paid by Alessandro Cagliostro and his wife, the Comtesse Felicitas, to Saint-Germain in Germany, and their subsequent initiation by him into the sect of the Rosicrucians, of which he was the Grand Master or chief. There is nothing improbable in the assumption that Cagliostro secured, that he got his hands on La Très Sainte Trinosophie from Saint-Germain, and that the manuscript is in every respect an authentic ritual of this society. So here we have, it's an alchemical treatise, but here is kind of saying it's a kind of ritual. Maybe it's a map. It's a map of a ritual. It is a metaphorical inner journey that's described, one of transformation, of transmutation. A spiritual mirror of the alchemical transmutation of base metals into gold, perhaps. The word trinosophie quite properly infers, or implies rather, a triple meaning to the contents of the book, or infers a triple meaning from the contents of the book. In other words, that its meaning should be interpreted with the aid of three keys. From the symbolism, it seems that one of these keys is alchemy, or soul alchemy, and that's, I assume that refers to what I just mentioned a minute ago, that alchemy can be understood as the transmutation of physical metals into gold, or it could be the perfection of the inner self, the perfection of the self, the spiritual self. Another Essenian Kabbalism, and the third Alexandrian Hermeticism, the mystery of the later Egyptians. From such fragments, again, I know so little about this, it's not even funny, but I guess we'll know more as we go. From such fragments of the Rosicrucian lore as now exists, it is evident that the brethren of the Rose Cross, the Rosicrucians, were especially addicted to these three forms of the ancient wisdom and chose the symbols of these schools as the vehicles of their ideas. The technical task of decoding the hieroglyphics occurring throughout La Trisophie was assigned to Dr. Edward C. Getzinger, an eminent authority on ancient alphabets and symbols, who is now engaged in the decoding of the primitive ciphers in the book of Genesis. A few words from his notes will give an idea of the difficulties involved in decoding. Oh my goodness, this doesn't end. Stick with me here, we'll get through this, whatever. It's kind of like a Harry Potter for adults, I guess. But I'm afraid terribly boring. I'm terribly bored by this, but like I said, we're in pursuit of an historical figure. We're in pursuit of, I think, applicable and terribly important knowledge if we can get to the bottom of this. So just bear with me. Archaic writings are usually in one system of letters or characters, but those among the ancients who were in possession of the sacred mysteries of life and certain secret astronomical cycles, never trusted this knowledge to ordinary writing, but devised secret codes by which they concealed their wisdom from the unworthy. We have to guard this. We can't let simple, ordinary people get a window into this very these treasures, right? Each of these communities or brotherhoods of the enlightened devised its own code. Around 3000 BC, before Christ, 3,000 years. Wow, we're jumping back. Only the initiates and their scribes could read and write. At that period, the simpler methods of concealment were in vogue, were in style, one of which was to drop certain letters from words in such a manner that the remaining letters still formed a word which, however, conveyed an entirely different sense. So sort of like taking, I guess, vowels out of words. As ages progressed, other systems were invented until human ingenuity was taxed to the utmost in an endeavor to conceal and yet perpetuate sacred knowledge. Oh, so they wrote it in code so that, certain very perceptive adepts in the future could pick up on, to catch the meaning, but the average person would be shut out of this valuable information, which to me, I continue to maintain, it is the priest class hoping to guard knowledge that it used to maintain control of populations for their own benefit. It's as vulgar as that, in my view. Quote, in order to decipher ancient writings of a religious or philosophical nature, it is first necessary to discover the code or method of concealment used by the scribe. In all my 20 years of experience as a reader of archaic, that is, ancient writings, I have never encountered such ingenious codes and methods of concealment as are found in this manuscript. In only a few instances are complete phrases written in the same alphabet. Usually 2 or 3 forms of writing are employed, with letters written upside down, reversed, or with text written backwards. It's kind of like when my students write in Mongolian with the Roman alphabet, but they drop the vowels out, It's really actually pretty cool. But even some Mongolian people have trouble reading what the young people write in the Roman alphabet. Vowels are often omitted, left out, and at times several letters are missing, with merely dots to indicate their number. Every combination of hieroglyphics, those are picture writing, seemed hopeless at the beginning, yet after hours of alphabetic dissection, one familiar word would appear, This gave a clue as to the language used and established a place where word combination might begin and then a sentence would gradually unfold. My goodness. The various texts are written in Chaldean Hebrew, Ionic Greek, Arabic, Syriac, cuneiform, Greek hieroglyphics, and ideographs. I guess like Chinese, maybe. The keynote throughout this material is at the approach of the age when the leg of the grand man, and the waterman of the zodiac shall meet in conjunction at the equinox and end a grand 400,000 year cycle. This points to a culmination of eons, as mentioned in the Apocalypse. Behold, I make a new heaven and a new earth, meaning a series of new cycles and a new humanity. Sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? The personage who gathered the material in this manuscript was indeed one whose spiritual understanding might be envied. He found these various texts in different parts of Europe, no doubt, and that he had a true knowledge of their import is proved by the fact that he attempted to conceal, to hide, some 40 fragmentary ancient texts by scattering them within the lines of his own writing. Yet his own text does not appear to have any connection with these ancient writings. If a decipherer, a decoder, were to be guided by what this eminent scholar wrote, he would never decipher the mystery concealed within the cryptic words. There is a marvelous spiritual story written by this savant, and a more wonderful one he interwove within the pattern of his own narrative. The result is a story within a story. End of quote. In the reprinting of the French text of the Trinosophia, the spelling and punctuation is according to the original. Of course, we don't really have the original. Remember that? The original was destroyed, and we're accepting on faith that the copy is faithful. It has been impossible, however, to reproduce certain peculiarities of the calligraphy. In some cases, the punctuation is obscure. Accents are omitted and dashes of varying length are inserted to fill out lines. Oh, the present manuscript is undoubtedly a copy, yeah, as we read, we found that out. As Philotome stated, the archaic characters and hieroglyphics reveal minor imperfections of formation due to the copyist being unfamiliar with the alphabets employed. The considerable extent of the notes and commentaries has made it advisable. You are advised to place them together at the end of the work rather than break up the continuity of the text by over-frequent interpolations. So we put some end notes you can check rather than being constantly distracted. You can just get swept up in the very dramatic text. La Trésante Trinosophie is not a manuscript for the tyro. I'm embarrassed. I forgot to look that up. What is the tyro? To me, this means maybe the dilettante, the uninitiated, beginners. Only deep study and consideration will unravel the complicated skein of its symbolism. Although the text matter is treated with the utmost simplicity, every line is a profound enigma. Careful perusal of the book and meditation upon its contents will convince the scholar that it has been well designated, quote, the most precious known manuscript of occultism. So next time we will actually get into it, I promise you, and you'll get a taste of the inner soulful alchemy, transmutation of self, and make up your own mind. So Thank you for sticking with me on this. I hope all is well with all of you, and see you soon. Talk to you soon. Be well.